Hello, good afternoon, everyone. I hope you all had a light lunch so that you don't fall asleep during my session. My name is Linn. I'm Microsoft Business Application MVP. I am currently working as a technical architect at Delta Insights company. In this whole session, you don't need to take the photo of the slides that you are interested. All you need is this particular slide, especially this QR code. That's where you download the whole slide deck, and you can just review it later for the information that you were interested in. Because most of my slides, each and every slide will contain the relevant URL at the footer of the slide. So that will explain you more details about the topics that I'm going to present today, because within 40 minutes, I can't really cover really in depth. So if you want to have more details, you can check it out and download the slides and go to the URLs mentioned in each slide. So if you missed it, the QR code now, don't worry, I put it in the discussion for online users, as well as it will be at the end of the last slide where a Q&A session. I will show the QR code again where you can scan it. So I will start with for basics for developers. Like you have here, everyone's just the developers doing JavaScript for web resources. Yeah, most of them. Okay, so just the basics. Whenever I go to a new inherit an existing project or somewhere they develop in-house, often I see is the web resource with something like this. Like they just create it without any extension, no folder structure. So one of the first tips for like beginner tip is just to create something like this so that one, it will be when you extract the solution, the files will be recognized by the file system, whether it's a SVG or JavaScript. And another, by having a folder structure, it will have a proper folder structure in both XRM Toolbox Web Resource Manager, as well as all of when you unpack the solution. It's have a proper structure. And oftentimes, when I have those juniors, then they develop first. When I review the codes, when they create a pull request, I often see the codes, the debugger, like they sometimes you even see it in the production code. So try not to use debugger, those console logs, alerts. What you can do instead is you can just use a browser dev tool to put a breakpoint, right? You don't have to do. If you put a debugger, imagine you put a debugger, okay, you debug it, and then you have to remove it again and publish it, and then you forget, it will get into the pull request. So the first thing is open a browser tool, and you can press a Control O or Control P to open and find the web resource file, the script file that you want to debug, and put it a debugger point. Or if you want to find this particular, there's another way that you can open as a search tab. That is a little bit tricky to find it in the menu, but the shortcut key is Control-Shift-F, where you can find it any code, even not just for your web resource, you can find it out-of-the-box scripts. All you have to do is find something unique to your code so that it will just find the results. And then once you get it, and you can put a breakpoint, and then you can trigger your form refresh or on-change event to put into the breakpoint. And what happens if you put like those debuggers, like consoles, and if you use a solution checker, it will detect it for you. Like it will make sure do not ship these debugging codes to the production. So it's a best practice. And if you have a solid pipeline, CI/CD pipeline, you can include it as part of the pipeline to run the solution checker so that you don't really even have to manually see through. So the code, the pipeline will check and raise it when you raise the pull request. And if you have, or sometimes if you have a customer, like the user, oh, I'm having a problem, but you try to replicate it, oh, it's working on my machine, but not you. In that case, what you can do is you can set up like a live monitor. So you can have more details in the Microsoft Docs site. And what you have to do is you open up a live monitor and then ask a user to connect it. And then they open that URL and they try to replicate in their own browser. And eventually, they will hit an error, the same error that you get. So all these sessions are like, if you're familiar with the web developer tool, you can see all these sessions, and then you can get all these error details. So instead of you trying to get reassigned to that user's roles and doing a lot of things, you can use a live monitor to do the joining someone to remotely debug it for someone's session. And oftentimes we have to like develop and like debug, save, publish, make changes. Oh, it's not working. Save, publish. So we waste a lot of time, right? So what we can do? We can develop using like a local, using like a fiddler. We can have a local copy where you can have it and use that fiddler to intercept and use your code in the browser instead of you doing the publish and save it again and again. So this is one of the tips. And it's good when you have, like, you can also edit, map it to one file, or if you use a lot of files, you can have it as a regex to map the whole folder. It's faster, you don't have publish, it's really convenient for TypeScript development. You update it in TypeScript, you compile it, and then you don't have to push it to the Dataverse. You just use it as a local version. And you can even develop concurrently on the same form, right? Two developers working on the contact form. Otherwise, like if you publish, your changes are being overwritten each other developer. So by doing so, you can have it without overwriting, putting on each other's tool. So if you cannot install, you're working as a contractor, you go to a client's, using a client's laptop, you can't install Fiddler or all these other tools. Even the developer tool has built-in function. So this is something that I recently found out, like a few months ago. So in the browser dev tool, what you do is you go to the sources tab, and then it's kind of like hidden in because so many icons, and then you have specify the override folder, so any folder within your local browser. And yeah, it just asks, oh, do you trust it and issues? And after that, what you have to do is same thing. You find your script within Control-P or Control-Shift-F. Once you find the script, you say, OK, override content. Right? So what it does is the browser will create the copy of this file into your like the local folder. So once you have it in a local folder, you either update it on the browser tool itself, or you update it with the VS Code or whichever tool that is really tool of your choice. So oftentimes, we're not the developers who make the development, right? We are working alongside with functional consultants. And functional consultants, they prefer not to do coding, so they go to use business rules. And we, as in like pro devs, we prefer to do JavaScript. So what are the rule of thumbs? So my rule of thumb, it may be like subject to different opinion, but it's just don't mix it, right? It's okay if you have functional consultant, you can have it. We just, for small screens, for small forms, they do this validation. But when it really comes to like getting complicated, show and hide sections and the tabs, and you do filter the lookup and all these things, in that case, we just try to rewrite those forms, those business rules, deprecate those and delete those. Just don't mix. Because if you mix, you are just a lot of troubleshooting, really hard to debug. Like, oh, this is not working. Like, oh, this is being overwritten. Like another business rule where we have, if you have a JavaScript, you can see everything in one screen. It's where you can easy to debug. And as is mentioned in Vivian in the first session, like the business rule, you can't really specify the order. The order is based on the order of execution, activation of business rule. So you may expect some unexpected behavior. And the JavaScript and business rule, if you happen to mix, it have a different execution order, like on load, business rules trigger first, and then JavaScript. And on change, JavaScript business rule trigger first, and the business rule afterwards. And then if you want to do something after business rule, you need to set timeout, and like, it's a lot of headache. Just don't mix it. And another time, like we try to get an inherit project, we try to do a lot of debuggings, and that is the time that is registering the event handlers. Like some people, they like to register the event handlers in each particular components and this. But in my opinion, like if it's a dev, there may be some benefits or registering to different components. You can do dependency and stuff. But for me, it's onload is all you need. Like you just have onload script, and in the onload script, you register all your event handlers for on change, on save, everything in one place. All right, so that's more the idea. Like you can see it as a code view, right? You can see, okay, we have this on load, we have this on loaded. And talking about all on loaded, like we have some events which are not even possible to register it on the UI. So at the time, you might have to do it in the script anyway, so might as well do everything in the script, right? Just try not to complicate it. And choosing the right event handler is important, especially now previously we have just onload, on save, right? Life is simpler. But now we have onload, on data loaded, and even on save, we have like on save, on post save. So we need to know when to use. Like for example, on load is just the first load, and when we first save the record, and then the URL change with the GUID, and then it's trigger again. And so on data load, then it will trigger as the on data refresh, and all these things. So this is important because sometimes the UI, like model-driven app, they improve, advance a lot. Like previously, every action, it just load the whole form. You just put it on the onload, safe, right? But no, nowadays we have a lot of things. We click resolve on the case, we deactivate the records. So the form is not loaded at the time. It's not really rendered anymore. So you need to make sure you want to register it in which event to make it right. Like for example, on loaded, like if you have any API calls, asynchronous call that is heavy loaded and populated in the fields which are hidden behind different tabs. So for those things, we just put it in the on loaded. And the same thing, like the save. So we have autosave and all these things is triggered on save. And if we want some business logic to validate and show it after on save, we have the on post save. So and then we have some, depending on if it is save or fill. Let's say sometimes we have server-side validation and on save event trigger, and then it goes to the server side, and it might successful or fail. But based on that, you want to trigger something, right? So in that case, you can use on post save. So on post save, so the exceptions is appointment, recurring appointment, and service activity. And in those cases, it doesn't trigger for on post save. And there are some scenarios where we want to trigger the script on the model-driven app level, right? Not just form. Like we have views, we have dashboard. Like I want to trigger some script as soon as the user stop opening the app, right? So Microsoft, they have, I'm not sure when they were released, maybe a few years ago. They have this XRM app global notification. So that is not, the name explains itself, it's a global notification, not particular to like a form notification. So it's useful when you want to show something, right? Or you can want to show something in the panel. You can add it to the panel, but you need somewhere to trigger the script. But you cannot trigger any script until you get to one of the forms. So the first page, the landing page is a dashboard, for example. You cannot trigger any script. So here, there is one like undocumented script. So please just try to use at your own caution, probably. But it's been around, it's mentioned in this blog post where you can add it to the event handler. So even Microsoft first-party apps, they have been using in some of their apps, but it's not documented, and it may be subject to change. So that is where you can, what you have to do is you have to add this event handler tag within this customization XML for your model-driven app, and enable it through, and then you can specify the library name, the function, and the event is on load, and then we can edit all the scripts. Okay, so now, so there are some client APIs for the controls, like you can, some of the controls supports the specific client API. So one of the examples is this set show time, and that is for out of the box like daytime control. But you can also build it like when you build a PCF control, you can also specify and edit the event handler for your particular PCF control. So this is from the documentation of one of the dialogs, and then they show how you can utilize their PCF control and add the event handlers. And we also have this Power Apps grids. So previously we have this editable grids, the legacy one. Now it becomes legacy because the Power Apps grid control is starting to support all these like editable grid features. And then you can have all these JavaScript functions added to the editable grid. So one of the use cases is, okay, I want if this is particular value, right? Based on this value, I want to disable the field. Okay, so let's say if the choice is like A, B, C, and other, if the choice is other, I want to enable another field, another column, which is the other text, free text field. And in that case, you can use the grid record select, and then you can check the current selected records and show hide or disable, enable those particular row. But if you're doing it for your subgrids, just make sure you register it on the subgrid onload event, because subgrids are not loaded immediately during the form load event, right? So you cannot use it. So make sure, maybe especially if the subgrids are in the different depths, so it's just only trigger when the subgrid onload event. Okay, so I just got my slides order wrong. So this is the continuation of the previous slide where the model-driven app onload one, right? So I mentioned how I mentioned is not undocumented, not supported, not supported, but yeah. So what you can do with the supported way, okay? So this is my blog post, and how you can trigger it in any page. So it is, the idea is we have this application ribbon, right? So application ribbon is not particular to any table. It's applied everywhere. And in application ribbon, if you use the ribbon events by Scott Duro, and there's a place called global tab. Right, so that global tab is where you can specify the custom rule, like an enable rule, right? Every button, you can specify the visible rule and the enable rule. In the enable rule, you can specify the custom rule, which is JavaScript. So that is where this button, right? So just precise those advanced find and all these things. So that's where you can add the button. And in that function, you do whatever you want, and then just return false. So when you return false, it will just disable. The button is disabled, so this button will not be visible. But you can trigger everything, whatever you want. But the only caveat is that this custom rule will trigger every navigation. Like if you go to the dashboard, if you go to the list view, and if you click on one of the records, it triggers each and every time you navigate around. So make sure not to put a lot of like web API calls and like don't. So one of the things you can do, I put it in the check it in the local and make sure this hasn't been triggered, and then make sure you only trigger it once. And just try not to put a lot of things in that script because it triggers all the time you navigate around. And another thing that I figured out like 2-3 years ago, we can really like update the records that when it is disabled, like deactivate it. So even if the record is disabled, you can open up like the level up extension called mode, and you can just disable, update it, and it just saved. So I think that's a change in the model-driven app where they allow the setting disable is just deactivation. The deactivated form is just a client validation, but no more server-side validation. So oftentimes, this is a sample like regular code. Okay, so if the document uploaded is true, then enable the remarks field. Otherwise, disable it. So it is, let's say this is my old code, right? And it works fine until let's change game. And what happened is even the record is deactivated. And since this value is true, and this becomes editable, like even in the deactivated screen. So now you have an additional check you need to do in your scripts that does the enabling the fields, doesn't enable, disable the fields. You need to make sure the form type, if it is a create, update, bulk edit, only then you enable the field. Otherwise, you just disable. So that is disabled in those read-only forms and others deactivated forms. This is the you conditionally check based on the event source. So you have a script you want to run, right? Like for example, this one is very similar. We have these two cascaded lookups, right? Or drop-down lists. If you choose category, you enable subcategory and you let it enter. And if you change it, like just clear the subcategory, and then if you set the category as empty, you just disable it. So that is a simple script, right? So we edit in the on change of this category, this clear and lock. Every time you change the category, you filter the subcategory because it's cascading, right? So you just want to wipe it out. And I want to do it, enable, disable on the form load as well. Because if there's the onload, I want to call it onload and also onChange event. But if you call the same function in the onload, it just clear the value as well, right? So in this method, I want to know where it is coming from, whether is it coming from onload, whether it's coming from onChange event. And in that case, you can use the event source. So each event source, for each event, all these execution contexts return the different type of objects for these event source. So for example, this onload, it will return the form context. And for onChange, it will return the column value. So by using that information, you can dynamically check whether you want to set this value as empty or not. So for example, if it is not on load, I want to set it clear the value. So in this code, you check whether this event source.form context is now like undefined. So for onload event, that will have a value. So if it is not onload, it will just go to inside this function. Or if it is, you check for onChange event, if the event source is .getName, so it comes as a column object. So you get a getName, and you get from which event source, from which column it is coming. So you can check whether this is an onChange event, and then you can dynamically set the value. So that is how you can reuse the same function and specify it at the different event source. And if we have like used the form components, those quick view form and the form component, that is where you can put the form from the lookup and you can make it editable. So those form components are only working fine if you add that related form to the model-driven app. Right, so as a result, what happened is we have this main form, and we have these form component forms. Like you have a lot in the drop-down list. So in order to hide those unrelated forms, you can use you can loop through this form selector and items, and you can set disable. And when we set disable, you don't have the form selector anymore, but sometimes we want to show the users different forms when the user, like based on the user security role, for example, right? In that case, previously what we have to do is we just like check the security role, call the web API or whatever, and then we just redirect it. So you just see the normal form, and immediately like it just redirect. So Microsoft has introduced the asynchronous onload, so where you can have it like you can return the promise, and you just do whatever asynchronous call that you want to make, and based on that, you just navigate and resolve. So as a result, they see the correct form right at the same time without navigating and seeing the wrong form and navigating away. So just like asynchronous onload, we have the async onsave. Right? We have async onsave. Similar concept. So when you want to do some validation on save, you just return a promise, and then you do your asynchronous validation and everything, and then you either like resolve or reject to prevent the save. So the saving event will like just keep spinning and waiting for 10-second timeouts until you resolve or reject. So similarly, for all these command bar buttons, if you want to show height based on another web API called asynchronous call, you just return the promise in the enable rule, and then you can resolve whether it's true or false. And then the button will be shown based on your condition. And we have, when we open up to another form and redirecting to another form, we have a couple of methods: the navigation.open form and the navigate to. Sometimes are also quite confused. Oh, when should I use when? Right? So this one, for first base, everything's the same. Like it can open all these basic stuff, pre-populating the data, opening a specific forms. You can achieve with both. So Microsoft, the open form is the old methods, but they came up with a new one. But a lot of functionalities are overlapped. But open form is a bit more useful when you want to open a pop-up record, like open a new window without a command bar or navigation bar, and open this quick create form. That's where you might want to use open form. And navigate to, you have other things like you open up in the dialog. In the middle, you just show it as a dialog overlay on top of it. Or you have this cross-table business process flow, like from code to order, code to opportunity, and then order. All these things you can specify, you can use it in the navigate. So this is regarding just opening up the entity form, right? But if you want to open up other things like open up entity lists, open up the dashboard, HTML web resource, or even custom page, so then you can only use the navigate to. This is the method. So when you open up the entity form, and sometimes you want to pass through some parameters. So those are a bit different from different methods. So I just share a quick, like how you can use it for the open form is in this format. But when it comes to the pre-populating using the navigate to, you need to be in this like the object form, not just a key value, but it's a bit more complicated. And Microsoft doesn't have documentation about it, so I just blog it. And if you have anything you want to use, you can just come across that. And yeah, so when the custom page came up, like a lot of people, we try to use it as the like replacement for the deprecated feature, the dialog. Like so, Diana's blog post about using the custom page as a dialog. That is something that we all are using in our project as part of the dialog feature. But the only problem is that it cannot return the data back to the JavaScript. So the custom page is not aware of the JavaScript, like it just closes it. We can't really return the data. So we had to do, like what I had do it in one of the projects is, so it's JavaScript open a custom page, and together with the entity ID, I just pass through some unique data, and then from the custom page, all the process completed, I patch, create a new row into one of the table, integration table, and pass through some of the value with the JSON object. So this is like an ugly workaround, but well, otherwise we will have to build something, the dialog functionality, from the scratch. So this is a quick workaround. And at the end, it just once the dialog is closed, then the JavaScript will go and retrieve that data record based on this unique identifier and just do the different process. In this command bar, the command bar, we have this disable rule and enable rule, right? You have, for those who have started working since the old CRM days, there's before it's called command bar, it's called ribbon. That's hence the name ribbon workbench. And at that time, it used to have two different rules, because disable rule is you can see the button, but it's disabled. But with this, the new unified interface, it all blur and come into just one rule. Not just one rule, still two rules, but even though it's disabled or it is hidden, it just hides. So you don't know when to use different things. So all of these things that we all use, common rules are entity rule, form state, value, those are available in both display and enable rule, and also some unique rules that we don't really use a lot. These are available in both display and enable rule. But in the display rule, we have this, it is only happen on the page load, right? So when you navigate it, come to the form, only form loads for the first time and the display rule kicks in. And whatever changes it has done in the record, once you open, it will not re-render the display rule. That is the what makes it different from the enable rule. So it has some entity privilege rule, form type rule. So we have show hide based on the new form type or edit form type, and other rules that I don't even know, I've never used. And in another different thing from enable rule is it's re-render every time when you call this UI refresh ribbon. So if anything change in your code and anything, you can call this method to re-render this records with the enable rules. And the most useful thing is available is a custom rule that is in the enable rule. So that's what we have it in the legacy ribbon buttons, but not in the new commanding bar. We can only have it as a PowerFX, but we can't have this custom rule in the JavaScript. And it's useful, the selection count rule, if you have a button for subgrid, you can use it as a selection rule. And other items, item tracking rule, not really used. And when you pass it, those ribbon buttons to your JavaScript, the most important thing is this primary control. That's one of the CRM parameters. So primary control is none other than the form context. Right? So once you get the primary control, you can get all the fields and controls from the form. And you You can have other parameters like the selected control. So selected control is whether this is from the current record. And in the selected item, so we have like 9 different parameters: selected control, selected item, count. So this is for the subscript control, so how many records the user have selected, and you can get the IDs or entity reference so that you can loop through and process. So let's say if you want the user to generate a PDF for a number of order lines, and you then select, and then you can use that on the record to find out what are the selected IDs, or all items, or unselected items. So you can do that. And there are other items, parameters that you can pass through the command bar, like primary type code and the selected entity type code. So you have the main form and you have the subgrid. So it will return the selected entity type code. So you have, for example, the activity subgrid, right? You can have email or tasks or different kinds of activities. So you can specify the selected entity type name to see what is the entity that the user is selecting. So another thing that I learned not too long ago, so when we use TypeScript, we can have this NPM packages. So for example, in TypeScript, we want to reuse, we have this called common module, and we want to use it across different scripts. So we can have it as a modularly, and you can even have a third party like the NPM packages. What you can do is you use those bundler like a rollup, parcel, or webpack, and then bundle it all together in the single JavaScript file. And then you upload it as a web resource file. Once you upload it, you can reference this. You can call it from another script, or you can call it directly from the forms or the buttons.